Ethan Miller would later understand that the paper taped to his door was never meant as a warning. It was a calculation, a silent experiment designed to measure how much fear could be poured into a person before something inside them finally cracked. At the time, though, it was just a piece of paper, bright yellow, centered carefully on the wood of his apartment door, placed with intention, as if whoever taped it there wanted to be absolutely certain it would be the first thing he saw. Ethan liked routines because routines asked nothing of him. Coffee brewed at exactly 7:15 every morning. He drank it black, standing by the kitchen counter, scrolling through emails he would answer later. By 7:30, his laptop was open. By 7:35, his headphones were on, sealing him off from the rest of the world. He designed logos, branding systems, clean visual identities for people he would never meet. His work required precision and quiet. His life reflected that. That morning followed the routine perfectly until he opened his door. The notice stared back at him, HOA logo at the top, bold text underneath. Notice of violation. Ethan frowned and peeled it off slowly, as if sudden movement might somehow make the situation worse. Unauthorized noise after 9 p.m., complaint received, further action pending. He read it once, then again, then a third time, each word growing heavier. Noise didn't make sense. He lived alone. He didn't own a television. He rarely listened to music without headphones. No guests, no late nights. Most evenings passed in near silence, broken only by the faint tapping of keys and the soft whir of his laptop fan. It was the last line that stayed with him. Further action pending. Not explained, not defined, just waiting. That night, the silence in his apartment felt different. It pressed in on him. Every sound seemed amplified. The refrigerator humming, pipes knocking somewhere in the walls, footsteps echoing down the hallway. Ethan caught himself pausing his work, holding his breath, listening. For the first time since moving in, the apartment didn't feel neutral. It felt like a place that was paying attention. The HOA office sat in the heart of the community, surrounded by manicured lawns and a brightly colored playground. It was bright, clean, designed to look harmless, the kind of place where nothing bad was supposed to happen. But the moment Ethan stepped inside, he felt it, the weight of something unspoken. The air smelled like disinfectant and artificial lemon, sharp enough to sting his nose. Linda Carver sat behind a glass desk, posture perfect, hands folded neatly. She smiled before he spoke. She didn't need to. "Mr. Miller," she said warmly, "how can we help you today?" Ethan placed the notice on her desk. "There's been a mistake." She glanced down at it briefly, nodded once, and folded her hands again. "Complaints are taken very seriously here." "I'm sure they are," Ethan said carefully, "but I don't make noise." Her smile didn't change. "The complaint came from a neighbor." "Which neighbor?" She tilted her head slightly as if considering the question. "We don't disclose that information." The answer landed harder than he expected. "So I can't respond to it?" "You can comply with community standards," Linda said, leaning just enough to make it feel personal. "What standards?" Ethan asked. "This doesn't say what I did." She slid the notice back toward him. "Rules keep everyone safe. I'm sure you understand." He left the office feeling smaller than when he'd walked in, carrying the unsettling sense that the conversation had gone exactly the way Linda intended. 2 days later, the envelope was waiting in his mailbox. Thick, official, final. $250 fine, repeated violation. Repeated. Ethan laughed once, sharp and hollow, then stopped. His hands were shaking. Repeated meant escalation. It meant someone had decided this wasn't a misunderstanding, it was a process. He emailed the HOA immediately, attached screenshots of his work hours, detailed his routine, asked for proof. The reply came back within the hour. Fine stands. Failure to comply may result in further penalties. No explanation, no evidence. That night, as he locked his door, he noticed his neighbor across the hall watching him. The man looked away quickly when their eyes met. Fear didn't arrive all at once. It slipped in quietly, disguised as reason. Maybe it's easier to just pay. That thought made Ethan's stomach twist. It felt like surrender, and the ease of it terrified him. The warning came from Sarah Nguyen in the parking lot the next evening. She smiled when she saw him, then noticed the folded notice in his hand. Her smile vanished. "HOA?" she asked softly. "Yeah. Do they do this often?" She glanced around before answering. "Don't argue with them." It wasn't advice, it was fear. "Why?" Ethan pressed. "People who push back," she said, voice barely above a whisper, "don't stay here long." "What does that mean?" She shook her head. "I shouldn't have said anything." As she walked away, Ethan noticed her hands shaking. That night, he searched the community online, looking for reassurance. Instead, he found silence, generic reviews, old listings, then fragments, deleted forum threads, broken links, half-written complaints about unfair fines and forced sales that ended abruptly. One cached comment stopped him cold. "If you value peace, don't challenge the HOA." The account no longer existed. This wasn't about noise, it was about control, and somewhere between the notices and Sarah's fear, Ethan realized something dangerous. He had already been noticed. The second complaint arrived faster than the first, an email at 6:47 a.m. Subject: Notice of community concern. Suspicious behavior observed. Resident advised to maintain transparency. The words were vague enough to mean anything. He replied immediately, asking what behavior had been observed. The response came back 5 minutes later. "Please refer to the community guidelines." No accusation, no explanation, just pressure. When Ethan spoke to Mr. Thompson, the old man flinched at the mention of the HOA. After a long silence, he confessed they had taken his house, not directly, but through fines he couldn't afford, promises that selling would make it stop, promises that were lies. Once Ethan started paying attention, he noticed the empty houses, curtains drawn, mail piling up, no listings, no explanations. People hadn't moved. They had been erased. The rule book confirmed it. 83 pages of vague language and discretionary power, no appeals, no limits. Whoever enforced the rules controlled everything. Mark Reynolds made that clear when he showed up at Ethan's door late one night. He didn't knock politely. He made sure Ethan knew this wasn't a conversation. "You've been asking questions," Mark said. "I'm allowed to," Ethan replied. "Not here," Mark said calmly. "We make things uncomfortable, enough that you decide this isn't your home anymore." That was the moment Ethan stopped hoping the problem would disappear. He started recording everything: calls, emails, notices. He bought a recorder, installed security software, backed up files twice. When Linda suggested cooperation would make things easier, the pause before she answered, "For everyone," told him everything. One clause in the rule book changed everything. Illegal. No due process. His lawyer confirmed it. Linda tried peace next, a deal, fines erased, silence restored. Ethan refused. The threat followed at 2:17 a.m., last warning. Going to the police felt like stepping off a cliff. Staying silent felt worse. Officer Daniels listened. The evidence spoke. This wasn't harassment, it was organized. The investigation moved quietly. Financial records, property histories, patterns. The HOA wasn't enforcing rules, it was harvesting homes. The arrests came on a Tuesday morning. Handcuffs, cameras, neighbors watching in silence. Linda's smile gone, Mark's intimidation useless. Then the community spoke. Stories poured out, fear cracked, truth followed. Mr. Thompson got his home back. Sarah testified. Her voice shook, but she didn't stop. The HOA dissolved and was rebuilt. Ethan was offered an exit, compensation, a clean break. He stayed. The final letter he posted wasn't a complaint, it was a reminder. Rules exist to serve people, not control them. Silence protects systems, not individuals. The darkest secret wasn't what the HOA did, it was how long it worked. Ethan still drinks his coffee at 7:15 every morning, but now when he opens his door, he understands something he didn't before. Fear only survives when no one speaks. Ethan didn't expect the quiet afterward. He had imagined noise, shouting, arguments, chaos, sirens, news crews everywhere. He had imagined confrontations stretching on for months, maybe years. Instead, once the arrests happened, a strange stillness settled over the community, like a held breath finally released. For the first few days, people avoided eye contact. Neighbors who had lived side by side for years suddenly didn't know how to look at one another. Some walked faster, others lingered on balconies, watching police officers move in and out of the HOA office, carrying boxes of documents that once held power. Ethan noticed how small the office looked without Linda behind the desk. Without her smile, the room felt hollow, like a stage after the actors had left. He stood outside once, watching officers tape a notice to the door. Not a violation, not a threat, but a closure order. The irony wasn't lost on him. At night, sleep came unevenly. The fear hadn't disappeared, it had simply changed shape. Instead of waiting for another notice or fine, Ethan found himself replaying conversations, tone of voice, moments he might have missed. His mind ran through worst-case scenarios out of habit, as if it didn't trust the peace yet. He wasn't alone in that. Sarah stopped him one evening as he was checking his mail. She looked exhausted, dark circles under her eyes, but there was something different about the way she stood. Straighter, less folded inward. "I keep expecting it to start again," she admitted, "like this is just another phase." Ethan nodded. "Me too." "They trained us," she said quietly. "That's what scares me the most. Even now, I feel guilty for not being scared enough." The word trained stuck with him. Fear, he realized, hadn't just been used as a weapon, it had been cultivated, reinforced over years, passed quietly from neighbor to neighbor. It explained the silence, the identical answers, the way people had learned not to remember. The hearings began a few weeks later, not dramatic courtroom scenes, but long, grinding sessions filled with paperwork, testimonies, and details that made the room feel heavy. Ethan attended most of them, sitting in the back, listening. Story after story followed the same pattern: complaints that didn't make sense, fines that escalated too quickly, meetings that felt less like discussions and more like interrogations. People described the same phrases, the same tone, the same smiles. It became clear that this wasn't improvisation, it was procedure. When Mr. Thompson testified, the room fell silent. He spoke slowly, carefully, as if choosing each word cost him something. He described how the fines made him feel incompetent, irresponsible, like a burden. How the offers to help him sell sounded reasonable at first, kind even. "They never raised their voices," he said. "That is what made it worse. They made me think I was the problem." Ethan felt something tighten in his chest. He recognized that feeling, the way authority, when delivered calmly, could make you doubt your own reality. Sarah testified after him. Her hands shook when she took the oath, but she didn't sit down until she was done. She spoke about her cousin, about the advice to stay quiet, about the fear that settled into her life like furniture, always there, always in the way. "I thought silence was survival," she said, "but it was permission." That sentence stayed with Ethan long after the hearing ended. The investigation widened. More names surfaced. More properties, more shell companies. The picture became impossible to deny. What had happened in this community wasn't an exception, it was a model. Ethan's lawyer explained it plainly one afternoon over coffee. They build a system that looks like governance, but behaves like predation. That's why it worked. People trust rules, they trust procedures. No one expects abuse to wear that face. Ethan thought back to the first notice, the clean layout, the neutral language, how official it had looked, how reasonable it had sounded. That had been the hook. The rebuilt HOA held its first public meeting in the community center, a space that suddenly felt unfamiliar. Chairs were arranged in rows, microphones were set up. The new board members introduced themselves slowly, cautiously, as if aware of how fragile trust was. Ethan watched faces in the crowd, skeptical, hopeful, angry, tired. People weren't clapping, they weren't celebrating, they were listening. For the first time, the rules were read aloud, defined, limited, subject to appeal. Every sentence felt like an apology without saying the word. When the meeting ended, no one rushed to leave. Small groups formed. Conversations started hesitantly, then gained momentum. Stories that had been held back for years surfaced in fragments, then fully. Ethan stood near the back, unnoticed, and felt something unfamiliar settle over him. Not victory, not relief, belonging. Weeks passed. Life didn't snap back into place. It adjusted slowly, unevenly. The community looked the same on the outside, the same lawns, the same buildings, but it felt different. Doors stayed open longer. People lingered in shared spaces. Silence was no longer assumed. Ethan kept his routines, coffee at 7:15, laptop at 7:30. But now when he worked, he noticed sounds without flinching. Laughter from another apartment, music playing somewhere down the hall. They no longer felt like threats. One afternoon he received an email from the city. Compensation details, an option to relocate, no strings attached, a chance to start fresh somewhere else, untouched by what happened here. He stared at the screen longer than he expected. Leaving would be easy, understandable, sensible. No one would question it. He imagined a new apartment, new routines, a place where no one knew his name or his role in any of this. But he also imagined Mr. Thompson unlocking his door again, Sarah standing at the microphone, the quiet courage it had taken for people to speak once they realized they weren't alone. Ethan closed the email without responding. The final notice he ever posted was handwritten. He didn't use letterhead. He didn't sign it as a resident or a victim or a whistleblower. He signed his name. He wrote about rules and how they were supposed to serve people, not replace judgment. He wrote about silence and how it protected systems far better than it ever protected individuals. He wrote about fear and how convincing it was, and how temporary. He pinned it to the community board and walked away. Months later, life felt ordinary again. That surprised him most of all. He still worked alone, still wore headphones, still preferred quiet, but the quiet no longer felt enforced. Sometimes he caught himself staring at his door before opening it, half expecting to see another notice. Each time, there was nothing, just wood, just a handle, just a choice. The darkest secret had never been the corruption itself. It was how long it survived on obedience. Fear hadn't needed chains or threats or violence. It had needed compliance, routine, the belief that resistance wasn't worth the cost. One piece of paper hadn't exposed the system. One refusal had. Ethan drank his coffee at 7:15 every morning, like always. But now when he opened his door, he did it without hesitation, knowing something he would carry with him long after this place stopped being home. Fear only survives when no one speaks.